Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we gather under the luminescent smile of the Bad Moon to discuss a matter of grave importance. The Gloomspite hordes could arrive at any time, and thus we better go over what to expect amongst their filthy ranks. Since their forces are mostly split alongside 4 sub-factions, namely the Moon Clans, the Spider-Fang, the Squigs and the Troggoths, I will also cover them in that way. So from the mushroom-addicted Green Menace to the mentally challenged giants of the Troggoths, tonight I will cover all of the forces of the Gloomspite Gitz. We're going to start off with the forces of the Moon Clan Night Gobbos, as these conniving whack jobs make their way into almost any army no matter their composition. The most basic of these are the Stabbas. These are simply put just night goblins who picked up the nearest pointy object they could find and decided it was time to riot. Encouraged by the funky beats of fungal-coated bronze gongs, they seek to wash over the enemy in a tide of green and pain. Normally, goblins are rather weak and cowardly creatures, but the energies of the Bad Moon infect them with a madness known as the Gloomspite. When under this effect, they follow the horde with little care for self-preservation, eager to create as much pain and destruction as possible to bring honor to the Bad Moon. Naturally, Grots never like to fight fair, a trait they share with their cruel boy cousins, and thus they have put plenty of tricks into their stained sleeves. Most common of these is the usage of heavy throwing nets. These are dumped over an enemy, entangling them and making them an easy target for the Grots to stab at their own convenience. Another common one is the usage of enchanted Bad Moon idols. These are imbued with a magic shield that causes arrows and other projectiles to wobble off course when they were about to hit the goblin horde. The ranged version of the Stabbas also exists and comes in the form of Shootas. These goblins prefer the ancient goblin tradition of hurting things in a way that they can't hurt you back by doing it from a distance, and thus they elect to use bows over pointy sticks. Like the Stabbas, they bring Bad Moon idols with them and are energized by the Gloomspite. And also for them, it is very much a numbers game, as their aim, especially in the daylight, is less than stellar. It may sound impressive that they blot out the light with waves of black-fletched arrows, but when you realize that maybe 10 of these are going in the right direction, it's a bit less impressive. Regardless, by coating the battlefield in thousands of arrows, they still manage to reap a toll of casualties amongst unsuspecting enemies. Of course, there is a limit to what one can achieve with kitchen knives or rat-sized arrows, and thus the concept of fanatics was introduced. Deep in the caves of the Gitz grows a sickly orange fungi known as the madcap mushroom. When mixed with squig blood and some other fungi, this creates a magical elixir known to goblin kind as Fanatic's Brew. This Kool-Aid makes goblins insanely strong, but also causes insane hallucinations and often causes a goblin to OD after their first time using it. Regardless, the local loom boss then gathers up a group of, well, the Codex calls it, volunteers of varying levels of willingness. These are force-fed the brew, overdosed on short-term narcotics, wrapped up in chains and carried along by the Grots. When the Gobbos then find themselves outnumbered or outgunned, they get the cat out of the bag. Handed a chained ball of steel that normally has to be carried by half a dozen Grots, they easily pick it up and start to spin like a Beyblade. In their drug-induced state, they see themselves as godly creatures of destruction and smash everything in the near vicinity to bloody pulp. That being said, they are just as likely to smash themselves into a rock, friendly fire their allies, or to fall off a cliff than they are to actually hit the enemy. So while they are a potent tool of destruction, like most goblin weapons, they are as reliable as Fortworld Finecast. Because of the common friendly fire issue with the Fanatics, one clever loom boss introduced the Spore Splata alternative. Twagweezer mushrooms are purple bulby mushrooms that don't just resemble prank channels in appearance but also in mentality. Twagweezers have an uncanny ability to always grow in the most inconvenient places. They might grow in a narrow cave passage, around someone's bed, within a loom boss's treasury, or next to a weapons rack. Then when you get near them, they explode and release a suffocating cloud of spores that literally liquefies your insides. Now, goblin constitution means that they are largely immune to the toxic effects, but Twagweezers still try very hard to become lethal by turning their surroundings into shrapnel. Or by simply blowing up the food supply. Anyways, by careful handling and using some shaman shenanigans, goblins have managed to take these and tie them to a rope. They are then given to the Fanatics and a little hole is pricked into them. This catapults the Fanatics all over the battlefield, accompanied by a loud farting noise, much to the amusement of the other goblins. The spore clouds that emerge from these fart rockets encode the battlefield in a dense purple mist, which obscures the goblin forces from sight. And as an added bonus, if any mortal troops are present, they start to suffocate while coughing up their own lungs. Fun stuff. Now to keep some order amongst these crazy wackos, they are led by a loon boss. There is no particular qualification one needs to become one. The Gloomspite are very much about equal opportunities in that way. You just have to be smart enough to manipulate the Gitz underneath you, lucky enough not to get eaten by a squig, stepped on by a troggy mommy, or stabbed by any of your competitors, and most of all, cunning and brutal enough to kill off any of your opposition, or at least enough of them to discourage the rest from trying. Once they reach a position of power, the newfound loon boss then quickly goes out of his way to make sure his position is secure. They task the dwarf slaves to fashion high quality weapons and loon armor for them. The moon helmet might seem symbolic, but when under the psychotic Gloomspite, the goblins actually have a compulsion to follow anyone who wears one. They get the shamans to enhance their gear with magical spells and mushrooms, and some even go out of their way to get a dangerous squig mount or a Trogout guardian. Another thing they like to do is to create a gimmick. After all, even Necrogoblikon will confirm that every proper goblin needs a gimmick to become relevant. Skragrod has his moon prophecies, Zograt has his insects, Blork has oceans of Trogout vomit, and so on and so forth. Then together with a ridiculous title such as Uber Under Loon King of Squig Drop Stabbeland, they then further solidify their high status. Next to the Loon Boss, the other main body of authority in the Moon Clan is the Fungoid Cave Shaman. These are generally speaking the most potent mages of the Gloomspite, and consider themselves priests of Mork. They can enter hallucinogenic trances during which they can see the future, receive word from Mork, or even talk to the dead inhabiting the Great Green. As such, almost everybody within the Gloomspite Gitz, and even amongst other destruction forces, respects them and listens to what they have to say. Even the cruel boys, who usually hate goblins, are willing to put their bigotry aside when a cave shaman wants to share his wisdom. That being said, like all things with the Gloomspite, there is some cheating involved, as the powers of cave shamans are very much an acquired ability. The famous Deathcap mushroom is one of the most prestigious, expensive mushrooms amongst Grotkind for its ability to induce extremely clear visions of the future. You could probably guess where this is going, as an aspiring cave shaman simply needs to get his hands on tons of this stuff and consume it until it turns into one. See, when consuming large quantities of Deathcap material, the spores will start to grow into your own body and might even cause various mushrooms to sprout from your brain. After this, let's call it an evolution, the now part Deathcap, part goblin creature enters a transcendent state of foresight, granting the aforementioned magical abilities. Or who knows, maybe they are just too crazy to tell what's real anymore. Final thing I should say about them is that the mushrooms growing into their brain still sporulate. This causes their brain matter to be clogged with spores that feed off the magic and imagination of the shaman. After a while, they will fall out of the nose, mouth or ears of the shaman and take shape. Some turn into small squigs, other into a bad moon-shaped cloud, some into a sagmapede, some into a bat. This causes a small army of familiars to always accompany the shaman, which can come in handy if anyone is foolish enough to attack them. Okay, that's the normal Moon Clan boys, but they also have two warbands, so let's go over those next. Starting off with the pirates of the Mirrored City, Zarbarg's Gitz. This used to be a renegade squad of gobbos that followed the seer Zarbag, whose prophetic visions allowed them to identify the location of various hidden treasures. By stealing these, they managed to get quite some cash, which they spent just as fast on drink and blow. On one crazy night, they got lost, and the next morning they woke up in the Mirrored City of Shadespire. Not remembering how they managed to get there, they started to explore, and Zarbag eventually found a field of Deathcap mushrooms. Now you might remember from the Fungoid Cave Shaman that these are the premium drug of Grotkind. Normally they are quite hard to find and even harder to cultivate, but in the cursed gardens of Shadespire, they somehow grew very well. As such, Zarbag and his Gitz now make their home amongst the Shadespire ruins and are on a mission to turn the entire place into a Deathcap farm. Then there's Grinkrog's Loon Court, a more recent addition to the underworlds, led by Grinkrog the Great. Grinkrog is a native inhabitant of the cursed Gnarlwood, and you might know this place as everyone and their mom tried to invade it for one reason or another during that underworld season. Grinkrog is a firm believer in chivalry and patriotism, so he was less than pleased that people started to vandalize his woods. Or at least, he calls it his woods. Convincing other goblins to join him via grand stories of Grot heroism, he has managed to get a group of knightly Grots to follow him on his crusade. One day the Gnarlwood will be free of filthy invaders and the holy land of Grinkrog will be restored to its former glory. Or at least that is what he believes. Not all goblins conveniently fit into one of the subfactions, either because they are sluts that tango with all of the subfactions, or because they don't tango with any of them. The Rebel Rousas are a good example of this. Rather than being just a moon-worshipping lunatic or a spider riding arachnophile, the Rebel Rousa travels far and wide to motivate all of Gloomspite kind to join the fray. Like a small version of Dr. Phil, they come to downhearted Gitz, sleeping Troggoths or depressed Arachnaroks and solve their motivational problems. Rebel Rousas are a recent development and seemingly started popping up right after the Rite of Life gave rise to the Era of the Beast. For so far unknown reason, these Grots have an exceptional talent for speaking, both in terms of what they say, but also in terms of having a magnificently boosted vocal capacity. The yapping of a Rousa can be heard echoing throughout an entire Lurglare, and they can yell hard enough to wake up a Troggoth. They then drive the Moon Clans into bouts of religious zeal by telling tales of the glorious Bad Moon. They convince the self-absorbed Arachnaroks to join by detailing the potential rewards in greatly exaggerated detail. They whisper weird magics that make even Mangler squigs listen to them, and somehow even awakened Troggoths decide to follow them instead of smashing them to pulp. Again, how they do this remains unknown, but some believe the cursed squig skeleton they wear might have something to do with it. Because this isn't just a dead chompy boy, it also features an energy field that causes projectiles to deflect away from them. According to the Rousas, this is because the projectiles are too scared to come near them, but it probably has a more magical nature. Additionally, it causes swarms of bad squigs to follow them. These normally cowardly creatures seem to flock around Rebel Rousas and even go so far as to act as suicide bombers if their leader is threatened, flying to the enemy and exploding like a targeting missile. Some races spend centuries learning the ins and outs of magic, but those are dumb nerds. The Gitz quickly figured out that copious amounts of drugs can achieve more or less the same effect with but a fraction of the effort. Madcap shamans are conventionally magic users of little renown. Sure, they can encourage nearby Grots with Gloomspite energy, cast Fireball and make some smoky material, but they don't achieve slum levels of cheating, but that is if they're sober. See, Madcap shamans like to consume large quantities of redcap mushrooms who imbue the user with enormous amounts of power. Suddenly they can go full Palpatine and code the Warzone in Green Lightning, or just whip up an endless spell. The big issue with this concept though is that there are two kinds of redcaps. There are the mushrooms and there are the toadstools. These look and smell basically the same, but one gives you superpowers, while the toadstool causes you to rot away into a cloud of spores. So whenever you see one of these taking a dose, they either turn into a god or start retching up their innards while their skin melts off. Quite the gamble if you ask me, but Grots aren't too concerned with safety. Then, before we go to the Snarlfang enthusiasts, we have to talk about one of the coolest boxes that Games Workshop has ever released, the Gobbapalooza. Now, purely in a vacuum, the lore is that the Gobbapalooza is the magical science team of a Gloomspite horde. Members of this squad can consist out of all sorts of weird shamans, wizards, mutants, alchemists, mushroom brewers, magicians, and so on and so forth. Gitslayer, for an example, has a dragon-like charred goblin that vomits up fire. However, in reality, there's only one kit with one set of rules, and thus we have 5 magical beings that act as a representation for what a typical Gobbapalooza could be. In the top left you can see the Boggle-Eye. The Boggle-Eye is a potent hypnotist who mind crushes anyone who looks into his eyes. No matter that it is an enemy or a friendly goblin, anyone is turned into a drooling nitwit for the duration of the spell. Next to the Boggle-Eye is the Scaremonger. The Scaremonger wears an elaborate mask and is carried into battle atop a large quick skeleton. This is to represent one of the ancient myths of Grot kind. During this myth, the awful Light of Haish, known as Glareface Frazzlegit, was attacked by the squig god beast Boingob. Glareface, who was considered the evil god of light in their mythos, proved too strong and flensed the flesh of Boingob with his radiance. The Scaremonger represents the victory of this evil god over their god beast, and to Gloomspite infused Grots, this is a very scary sight indeed, causing them to run away from it towards the enemy, who suddenly seem a lot less scary in comparison. On the bottom left you can find the Spiker. The Spiker is a somewhat sadistic Grot that specializes in the synthesis and extraction, but also especially application, of everything toxic. They coat the weapons of their tribe in venom, or for the right price, sell special potions that can make your competitors sleep for a very long time, if you know what I mean. Since they are especially common amongst the Spiderfang tribes, this one is represented with a bunch of spider mutations. His staff has a scorpion squig tail attached to it, making it a potent weapon capable of stabbing people from a comfortable distance. In the middle you can see a Shroomancer being assaulted by a Shroombat. Similar to the movie Inkheart, Shroomancers have a talent to make fiction a reality. Every time they hallucinate about a magical mushroom creature, it pops into reality and follows them around. And the last one is the Brew Git. In a way, this might be the most important of the ensemble, as they can produce all of the magical brews and potions used by the Gloomspite Gitz. From Fanatic's Brew to Redcap Extract, they can make a wide variety of potent, unhealthy and usually addictive potions. Just like in the real world, different religions always get together very well, so when the Git mobs who inhabited Haish and worshipped Glare-faced Frazzle Git were reunited with their loony cousins, they naturally got along very well. After all, what are religious differences when you could exterminate other races together? No, who am I kidding? The reunion of the Moon Clans and the Git mob led to a millennia of warfare, with both killing each other on sight. I mean, Glareface is like the Gloomspite version of Satan. It's a symbol of all they believe is evil. So only recently, after someone actually spread a rumor that the howls of the Snarlfang wolves used by the Git mob attracts the Batmoon, have hostilities ceased. The codex doesn't mention who started it, but it does sound like either Scragrod or a clever rebel rouser to me. Nowadays they work together to bring about the Everdank, as even the Git mob wolf boys can appreciate the high caused by the Batmoon. But yeah, outside of religious differences, what makes the Git mob so special is their affinity for breeding Snarlfang wolves. They raise these from pups, who are potentially stolen from a very angry mother wolf, into massive dire wolves with a poisonous bite. They then ride these into battle with bows, spears, shields and very cool fur hats. A special group of the Git mob is the Rippa Snarlfangs, an underworld's warband. Rippa at some point believed he had what it took to become the next leader of the Git mob clan, so he and his buddies, Meaneye and Stabbit, tried to secretly shank the leader of their tribe. Now that is normally how Git mobs get a new leader, so that's all nice and dandy, but they screwed up their ambush, and thus were exiled from the tribe for attempted murder. Rippa and pals are now on a quest in the Beastgrave. Rippa keeps dreaming about a dwarven cleaver that would be so powerful that he could kill his old tribe leader and return home. Because of this, they have been in a cat and mouse game with a group of fire slayers, and the Rage of the Mountain short story basically covers how that goes. But with the Git mob covered, let's go to another goblin religion next, in the form of the Spiderfang, a whole subsection of goblins that love nothing more than giant spiders. The trademark force of the Spiderfang are probably the Spider Riders. These grots have tamed any of the many man-sized spider species that inhabit the mortal realms. Now the reason for this is of course their fanatical obsession with everything spider, but these spiders actually make great mounts. They act as supreme light cavalry, capable of scaling walls, jumping great distances, spinning webs and poisoning enemies. The grots utilize this maneuverability to surround enemies so they can shoot them from hidden angles or so they can ambush isolated targets. These all become even more useful when you learn that the goblins mostly execute raids to capture live prey rather than any material or territorial reasons. If you would like to learn more, I recommend watching my subfaction video, but basically they capture prey in web nets and bring them back to their Arachnorc overlords as an offering. Final noteworthy thing is that the goblins decorate themselves to be just as colorful as their mounts, because in their obsession they want to get as close to the spider as possible. This can mean applying colorful war paint made from toxic plants, wearing a bit of exoskeleton, fashioning spider-based jewelry, or finding colorful feathers to stick in their skin. Altogether, spider riders are weird and even other goblins think so, but if you want some fast, reliable cavalry, these are excellent. Or at least lore-wise. Similar to the fungoid cave shamans of the Moon Clan, the Spiderfang too are mostly directed by their spiritual leaders. These so-called web-spinner shamans fill the role, but they are not as respected by the non-Spiderfang tribes as the cave shamans are by other tribes. Again, the Spiderfang are mostly seen as insane, but reliable allies by other destruction factions. Regardless, these goblins let themselves be bitten repeatedly by spiders with hallucinogenic venom to induce visions and courage. They even let these tiny spiders live on their bodies and make tiny nests between their toes. When properly high, the cave shamans then receive visions from their spider god on what to do next, and this often involves capturing more loot and prey to appease their spider overlords. The spider venom also affects their magic, and similar to the spore spells of the Moonclan shamans, their spells become all spider-like. They can summon swarms of hand-sized spiders to overflow their foes, or create large web-like shields to fend off artillery. Finally, I should mention that they also have an option to use an Arachnarok spider mount, but I won't go into that much further because it is literally this guy on the spider that I will cover next, so you can pineapple pen that yourself. As established previously, these grots simp for that spider Nusi, and as such literally worship Arachnarok spiders like gods. They build shrines to them, pray to them, and most importantly, bring them a constant supply of food. The latter has caused many Arachnaroks to accept such a cult following, happily accepting all of the donations without even having to post lewd 8-feeted pictures. Young Arachnaroks tend to still enjoy the thrill of the hunt, and will usually accompany their spider fang into battle, either as a brute beast of destruction or with a howdah of gobos on their back. They are great war beasts, and the way they move probably drives the goblins wild as they gladly follow them into battle. The older Arachnaroks prefer to stay in the back, however, away from all of the dangerous action. They let the goblins build catapults on their backs to launch balls of spider napalm on the enemies. This stuff is a mixture of spider silk and biting poison that sticks to enemies and causes them to slowly dissolve. Some have even gotten so used to a particular web spinner shaman that they let him build a shrine on their backs. The shaman then shouts directions and hymns from his shrine to encourage the grots in combat. A particular special breed of the Arachnarok spider is the Skitterstrand. These have been infused with the magic of Shaiish, and this somehow allows them to create portals. Don't ask me the logic behind that though. Normally Ulgu is the weird trickery realm and Warpstone allows one to create holes in reality. Why Skitterstrands use Shaiish magic for this is something only Sigmar knows. Anyways, these guys are understandably scary as they are house-sized spiders that can randomly appear out of thin air to capture whomever is unlucky enough to be nearby. Web spinner shamans are the spiritual leaders of the tribe, but they still need someone to lead the war efforts and raids on the field. Someone willing to lead from the front, with reckless abandon to inspire the grots, while having the brains to survive such maneuvers. As such, the shamans pick grots of particular brawn and brain to promote to the rank of Scuttleboss. These are not just given a rank, but also included in increasingly weird arcane rituals, during which they are exposed to and bitten by venomous spiders. These rites cause them to slowly mutate into a spider grot hybrid, with some evolving mandibles, some getting extra limbs, extra eyes, etc. When they are developed far enough, they will seek a special giant spider to mount into war. These spiders are a bit smaller than Arachnaroks, but far more brutal and far more poisonous. Staring one down into submission is no small feat, but once tamed, they are excellent mounts capable of felling even a dragon with their bite. Arachnophobics can rejoin the chat, as that rounds up the Spiderfang troops. Let's look at all the massively dumb and massively massive giants next. We're gonna start off with the Ale Guzzler Gargant, because unlike everyone else in this category, it actually is not a troll. They are furthermore unique in the fact that they are also not humorous at all. Like seriously, Ale Guzzlers are basically depressed giants that want nothing more than to drink themselves into sweet oblivion. Thinking back to the glorious Age of Myth, during which the sons of Behemoth were a mighty kingdom, and looking at their current pathetic state, they are filled with sad rage that can only be vented by copious amounts of destruction combined with copious amounts of fungal beer. The grots meanwhile are happy to fuel their addiction. What is the cost of a couple of vats of fermented fungi spiked with some magic mushrooms when compared to the power of a giant? Dumb bullet sponges who care as little about their lives as the grots make an excellent frontline. As such, plenty of grot tribes have one or two giants sleeping off their latest hangover somewhere in their lurk lair. Alrighty, then to the Troggoths, also known as trolls to everyone with the right number of chromosomes. Trolls are large humanoid creatures with the strength of a Hulk, the adaptability of the Swarm Lord, the regeneration of a werewolf, the elemental magic of Ang, and the intellect of a freshly lobotomized toddler. Like seriously, these guys would be the most intimidating creature of the realms if it weren't for the fact that they are so unbelievably dense. As the 2nd edition codex puts it, It says a lot about the trolls that all of these powers had to evolve just so the Troggoths wouldn't die out as a race. Regardless, the first of these in the Gloomspite hordes are the Rock God Troggoths. Like I mentioned, trolls have an immense talent for adaptability. Just like Kirby, they evolve based on whatever they eat, and in the case of rock trolls, they like food with a crunch. And as such, they have started to eat rocks, crystals, and other things they encounter in the dark caves they inhabit. Whenever they aren't asleep, they often spend their time expanding the rocky cave system, not for any logical reason, but simply because they have the munchies. Because of this rocketarian diet, they have developed a rock-hard skin that provides protection against incoming damage. Furthermore, they have developed a talent for geomancy, which allows them to shape solid bedrock as if it were clay. If they weren't so smooth-brained, they could use this to shape rock into all sorts of wonderful statues or fortifications. Reality being what it is, the smartest of them manages to invent a stone club, while most don't get farther than creating rough boulders to throw at the enemy. What makes them so dangerous to people though, is that their rocky hide makes them seem like actual rocks. These guys can sleep for an insanely long amount of time, so that mossy rock that has been lying there for years could suddenly turn into a monstrous brute bent on wanton destruction. Another common troll species is the Fellwater Troggoth. Unlike the cave-dwelling rock trolls, these guys prefer to live in the murky swamplands. Now, as Shrek has taught us, swamps are prime real estate, so unless you defend that shit, people will come to take your swamp away from you. To do so, these smelly boys have developed a skin that constantly drips a slimy snot, so foul it would trigger even Lena Rhodes' gag reflex. This stuff makes their skin extra lanky and tough, while also being more toxic than a Blizzard boardroom. But back to the gag reflex. The real thing these trolls are known for is their ability to imitate Blastoise. But instead of guns, they use their mouth, and instead of water, they shoot buckets of corrosive vomit. This napalm-like substance melts flesh and armor in seconds, leaving their targets not just utterly disgusted, but also utterly dead. Okay, but we've poked enough fun at the remnants of Warhammer Fantasy for now. Let me introduce you to the trolls with the power level of Age of Sigmar. The Dankold Troggoths are trolls with a particularly nasty craving. These trolls enjoy nothing more than eating magic. Since Realmstone is the crystallized form of that, it looks particularly appetizing to this troll subspecies, and thus many have tried eating this, well, nuclear meth. Just like Realm Crystal though, even the constitution of a troll couldn't survive such levels of power. But that's where the Gloomspite Gitz come into play, as they have been cultivating all sorts of magical mushrooms on exposed nodes of Realmstone, with the fungi flourishing on the wild magic, while also imbuing it with the magical powers beloved by their shamans. At one point, probably by accident, these magic-crazed trolls stumbled upon such a magic shroom field and went to town, eating tons of these magical mushrooms until they dozed off in a magical food coma. During their sleep, which sometimes could last for centuries, their bodies morphed to more closely resemble the shrooms they ate, because again, remember that "you are what you eat" isn't just a proverb for Troggoths. Their skin became thick and fungal, capable of resisting large fluxes of magic, while also forming a rich substrate for various fungi. Salt crystals and rock formations started to manifest as the years went by, and most crazy of all, like a fungus, the body of the troll started to adapt to the space of its surroundings. Enormous trolls who barely fitted into the cave became tiny orc-sized creatures. But those who entered one of the large, danky dens of the Gloomspite turned into humongous monsters. Seeing these creatures as blessed avatars who carry the comfortable dankness of their caves into battle, the Grots love these creatures. After all, who wouldn't like to see a troll completely evolve to their own personal culture? And yes, of course, the fact that these rapidly regenerating, magically immune brutes form the strongest meat shield known to mankind also helps their popularity. A special version of the Shroom Trolls is the Dankold Trogg Boss. Like its name implies, these lead groups of Troggoths into battle, and with one recent exception, they form the closest the trolls have to a figure of authority. These Troggoths have claimed the dankest, wildest caves in the Lurklair to make their home in, and as a result they have become even more clammy than the conventional Dankold Troggoths. Magical fungi coat their bodies, crystal formations sprout like adornments from their backs, and they are even harder to hurt than normal trolls. These pinnacles of Troggoth perfection are such chads that every troll they come across follows them without even thinking about it. In a similar vein, insects, small squigs and other weird stinging creatures accompany them for no particular reason than their chad Gloomspite aura. As a result, a single Trog boss who decides to go for a walk can result in a horde of trolls that wreaks havoc wherever they go. For an example, there's even a Trog boss who wanted to go swimming in the ocean. The most direct route to the ocean was through a heavily defended city of Sigmar. Being too dumb to understand the issue, he simply walked through the city, and he had gathered so many sim trolls that they accidentally won a siege battle against the city without even really trying. Then to Trug, the Troggoth King. Now I'll get to his entire story once I get around to covering the second Dawnbringer's book, as that is basically his origin story, but in short, Trug is a massive dank-hole Trog boss who found himself in a rather peculiar situation as people accidentally built an arcane altar on his head while he was sleeping. Yes, this guy went full Snorlax and managed to sleep through the entire births and endings of civilizations. Some taught him part of a cave wall and carved crude paintings on him, and yes, others built an altar on him. As a result of that, he has been constantly fed more and more energy as his altar channels the magical energy that flows through the realms. It was only recently, after Alariel's Rite flooded the realms with beastly vigor, that he was awakened from his slumber. Partially because of a particularly annoying rebel rouse as well though. In his wake, he had gathered an enormous following, as he was the strongest, most brutal Troggoth these Gitz had ever seen. The problem is just that he has a horrible migraine, as the altar on his back interacts with the ley lines spread throughout the realms. Every nexus of ley lines acts like an awfully bright light that scorches his brain, and thus like an angry Tenton moth, he has been flocking to each magical nexus to snuff out the light. Just a little shame that Sigmar has been building all of his cities right on top of these nexuses. Oh yeah, and I could make a point about how this is basically the exact shtick of Arcs of Omen and Engron, but of course I would never question Games Workshop's impeccable originality. The last Troggoth on this list is the warband of Moloch's Mob. Moloch the Mighty simply wants a quiet place to nap without interruption, which is understandable to be honest. All was fine as he found an abandoned cave deep in Shaiish where no one would ever come. Or would they? Skaven have a tendency to accidentally end up in places they really shouldn't be, and Moloch's bedroom was one of these. Pissed about being awoken by these rats, he and his armada of magical critters fought off the Redmen, and they managed to do this, but the Skaven weapons had ignited his entire cozy sleeping space. Moloch then set off to find a new place to sleep and accidentally wandered into the Night Vault of Shadespire. Something which was not just unfortunate for him, but also for everyone else in the Mirrored City. For a variety of reasons, this is a highly contested area with many different warbands fighting for dominion, and thus the opposite of the cozy sleeping space that Moloch was looking for. Yet at the same time, one can also not really leave this place as easily, so he is forced to stay there. Driven to anger by sleep deprivation, he has now started a total war campaign to kill everything in the Night Vault, so he can finally get some sleep. Very well then, off to the last faction, the Grots who have either balls of Realmstone or severe brain rot, the Goblins who dare to mess with the extremely wild and dangerous teat balls called Squigs. The main unit for those looking to buy into bouncy destruction, thus also is simply Squigs, a whole herd of them. These typical cave squigs are the most common and vanilla of the squig race, but that doesn't make them any less dangerous. These creatures mysteriously sprout from the dank floors of the caves they inhabit, much like mushrooms or a futuristic orc. They quickly grow into sheep-sized balls of teeth with bouncy agility and unlimited energy. These then go looking for food and spread squig spores wherever they go, from which new squigs will eventually grow. Understanding the military value of these shock troops, loom bosses are willing to pay handsomely for any grot capable or mentally challenged enough to hurt these monsters. There's little love involved as the grots use large prod sticks to goad them into their pens where they can be bred. When it is time to go to war, they then just set them free and use all sorts of cunning tricks to make the tide flow more or less towards the enemy. Some use big gongs to scare the sound-sensitive squigs away, while others literally use the Minecraft method and tie a tasty mushroom to a wooden fishing rod. Outside of war, squigs are used like any other farm animal. Their meat is considered a tasty meal by the grots, their skin is used to fashion clothing, instruments, furniture and more, and their skeletons can be used as decorations, and even their poo acts like an excellent fungal fertilizer. A way more specialized breed of the squigs is the sneaky snuffler or snuffle squig. These creatures are especially popular in Moonclan tribes who use them as truffle hawks. Snufflers have an excellent sense of smell which borderlines on the magical. They can easily identify edible shrooms from caves miles away, alerting their owners to the presence of prime goods while also warning them for toxic fungi by honking at them in the distance. With enough training, they can even be taught to look for a specific species of fungi, so shamans might get a couple to help them find the right ingredients, while fanatics, loon bosses and traders might get some to look for the popular looncap shrooms. These form the base for many drinks and potions, while also being a popular pick-me-up snack. Like a mixture between cocaine and more cocaine, they fill the user with a manic confidence and violent intent. Snuffle squigs even have a religious use. They start to howl like wolves whenever the bad moon is nearby, and this way, even grots that live deep underground know when it is time to go to the surface. One of the quickest ways to earn some form of renown amongst grot kind is to become a squig hopper. These grots dress up like knights and get themselves a pet squig. They then feed this beast a mixture of puff gut and hop splatter, which gives the squig a formidable case of feisty flatulence. They then climb the squig and try to hold on for dear life while the beast's farts propel it through the enemy ranks. Provided they somehow manage to survive the ordeal, they'll tell the greatly exaggerated tales of how they led the heroic charge, how without their knightly cavalry, the battle surely would have been lost. How noble they looked, dashing over the war zone, riding such ferocious beasts. The part where they were begging for their mommy while they shed themselves in all the colors of the rainbow is conveniently left out, of course. So yeah, a quick way to get yourself killed, but also an easy way to earn some clout. Now, for how much I shit on them, the grots sometimes actually do know what they're doing, and in this case that is in the form of the Boingrot Bounders. These are the veteran squig hoppers who have survived countless battles riding atop their crazy mount. Small asterisk though, that by countless, I of course mean the Troggot definition of the word. Surviving 2 or maybe 3 charges is such a mythical feat that you can become a Boingrot Bounder. Anyways, these knights dress themselves to show off their status, and all the time they spend making up their own achievements is starting to pay off. These guys are greatly respected by their fellow goblins, and even the squigs rarely eat them anymore. And guess what? Boingrot Bounders actually have become so good at riding squigs that they can do so without heart attack inducing panic. This relative calm allows them to actually fight while charging through enemy lines. They bring large lances with them, which combined with the speed of a squig hit with armor-shattering strength. In the same line of thinking, some loom bosses also seek to further their claim on power by finding and taming the biggest badass cave squig they can find. I mean, there's little more I could say about this model. It is a loom boss literally put on a giant cave squig, which is just a cave squig, but bigger. In a similar vein, there's the loom boss with giant cave squig, very much the same, but then next to it instead of on top. Fun trivia though for the new facts, this model is actually the Warhammer Fantasy model for Skarsnik. This guy was basically a more cunning, less magical version of Skragrod, who managed to gather a large number of greenskins, including orcs, in his army. He then fought in the battle for Carrick 8 Peaks against the Skaven and the dwarves. He furthermore went on a campaign to sow as much fear as he could throughout the Empire, and if you'd like to learn more about the latter, I recommend reading Skarsnik by Guy Haley, and a review for that can also be found on the channel. Okay, with those two awkward models aside, back to the actual fluff with the squig boss. These are weird loners who prefer to live far away from their fellow grots, instead making their homes amongst the squig caves. Here they practice and perfect the art of squig taming, breeding and herding. Surely, they might be joked about behind their backs for this, but with how much favor they get from the average loom boss, only an idiot would say that to their face. Oh yeah, and the fact that they often bring a highly aggressive Nasha squig with them also contributes to that. Squig bosses claim to be the masters of esoterical powers that allow them to speak with squigs, spending so much time with them that the squig god beast Boingob has blessed them from the afterlife. In reality though, the squig boss circles are just expert shrooms shamans. In secret shroom gardens hidden in the squig dens, they breed a variety of very rare mushrooms that no one outside of the squig boss circle has even heard about. Years of experience and ample experimentation has taught them exactly which of these to combine in which doses to achieve the wanted results. Being able to induce special powers, quirky mutations, and even certain types of behavior in their squigs using their diet, the squig bosses seem like true sorcerers from the outside. Then finally, the centerpiece model of the squiggalange, the Mangler Squig. Have you ever been faced with a situation in which there is no logical, rational way to accomplish the goal, and thus you just let Jesus take the wheel? Well, Grots certainly have, but in their case, Jesus is a 30 feet tall ball of uncontrollable fury. No creature in the realms could be stupid, crazy, and plain weird enough to capture a Mangler Squig, ram a metal chain into it, and ram the other end in, you can guess it, another freaking Mangler Squig. A Mangler Squig is so wildly destructive and incapable of reason that even squig bosses and bounders see no way to reliably control them. The only thing capable of holding its own against a Mangler is, after all, another Mangler. So yes, of course, tying two together so they fight each other instead of the Grots around them makes perfect sense. Some Grots are then given a pat on the back and told to steer these two fighting balls of death towards the enemy. If they manage, the Mangler's uncontrollable fury can lay waste to even the most fortified army or fortress. God, I love this model. Anyways, that rounds up the basic troops, so let's go to the endless spells and the dedicated terrain piece. The first of the endless spells is the Malevolent Moon, which basically works like a hunting talisman. A shaman pulls out a small moon-shaped stone, speaks the right words, and boom, a magical moon monster appears. The moon then just goes hunting for enemies to eat and spells to quench. Morg's Mighty Mushroom is created by infusing a mushroom spore with considerable quantities of magic. Something which can be done intentionally or also accidentally by shamans who have a spore stuck in their pants. But regardless, this spore erupts as a massive skull shroom whose spores cause mushrooms to burst from any creature that comes into touch with them. Scrap Scuttle's Arachna Cauldron acts a bit like a demon or a genie, in the sense that it grants extreme magical power to the one who summons it, yet it also immediately starts to drain the life force from anything nearby, no matter whether it is a friend or a foe. And then finally there's the Scuttle Tide, which is a Spider Fang specialty, or at least I hope so. A shaman needs a spider amulet, made out of a skullback spider cast in jade or amber. Focusing on this, they then cast a spell, and a horde of magical spiders appears. These attack anything not spider related, so you better make sure to get out of their way if you ain't a spider furry. The dedicated terrain piece of the Gloomspite Gitz is the epic Bat Moon Loon Shrine. These shrines are built from the meteorites that frequently fall down whenever the Bat Moon smashes through the sky. These so-called fangs of the Bat Moon are gathered by the goblins and used to construct uncanny realistic effigies of their moon god. What is even more uncanny is that the material these meteorites are made of is not just rock, but a magic mineral called Loonstone. Loonstone emits a faint shimmer in daylight, but starts to shine a sickly yellow color at night. It furthermore acts as a lodestone and amplifier for Wa energy, which is why the Grots often build the exits of their lurk lairs right under these buildings. But what all of that simply boils down to is that you might one night stumble across a glowing moon rock the size of a building, from which an army of Gloomspite Gitz starts to erupt like a tidal wave. Don't get near, avoid at all costs, preferably burn down and salt the ground with napalm. Then finally to the big boss himself, Skragrod, the Loon King. On one eventful night, the Moonclan Grot known as Skragrod was plagued by nightmares, during which the Bat Moon spoke to him directly, filling his head with plans and prophecies that would bring greatness to goblin kind. When he woke up, he was covered in a thick layer of clammy beetles and found that some transformations had occurred to his person. Out of his skull now sprouted a crown of fungi, a rare Batloon boss fungus had grown on his staff, and a magical skull wand had somehow found its way into his possession. With these obvious signs of the Bat Moon's blessing, the Grots of his tribes bowed to his command and accepted him as the prophet of the Bat Moon. Or at least that is what Skragrod says is what happened. Anyone who gainsays him tends to get a one-way ticket to the Mushroom Asylum. What we do know for sure is that after seizing control of his tribe one way or another, he led them to the city of Ayada. This city already wasn't doing too well as its population was fighting a war on two sides. The Ironjaw forces regularly tried to raid them for resources, and the Nighthaunt too had set their eyes on the city. Skragrod had accurately predicted that the Bad Moon would make its appearance on the night of the Gloomspite arrival, so with the warring forces all weakened by previous assaults, and with the Gloomspite empowering his army, Skragrod's forces conquered the city in a single night. This display impressed the Bad Moon so much that it blessed the lands with a big belch of moon dust. Now coated in a permanent dank twilight, the renamed Scrap-a-Spill became the capital city for Skragrod's Grodd Empire, but he wasn't done yet. Being able to predict the moon once is nice and all, but amongst the ever-ambitious Grodds, you need a lot more if you want to avoid getting shanked, and that is why he started building the Mushroom Asylum. His agents travel all over the realms to find particularly smart or magically gifted individuals and bring them back to Scrap-a-Spill. Skragrod then turns them into a gibbering mushroom and has them placed into his own personal subrealm. His shamans analyze and report the mutterings of these sentient shrooms back to Skragrod, who has so far been able to predict the Bad Moon's movement surprisingly well. This, in combination with Skragrod's excellent manipulation skills, manic tactics and mind-blowing magical prowess, has seen him rise to the de facto leader of the goblin race, and even those who don't follow him willingly are scared enough of his power to step in line when asked. And that rounds up the lore of the Gloomspite Gitz models. I love how this army perfectly captures the horror comedy duality of the greenskins. Like, if you're looking at this from the goblin perspective, all of these models are hilarious. But the moment you start to think about what this means for anyone who isn't a goblin, oh boy. Picking a favorite is very hard for this faction, so make sure to let me know yours if you do manage to pick one. I love the wildness of models like the Gobblepalooza and the Mangler Squigs, but then you also have the menacing Skragrod with his two little rope squigs, and of course the warbands too are top notch. Regardless, that's all I got for you today, so stay tuned for the next episode of Armory.